Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, September 30th, 2021, and today we'll be taking a look at the state of Colorado and why Democrats in specific seem to be upset with the districts that are drawn in this state. Now, Colorado is a state, one of the few states that are actually gaining electoral votes, and Democrats are in this position where they view the state as a pretty solid one. Most recently, in the 2020 presidential election, Joe Biden won the state of Colorado by 14 points. So when Democrats see this, they expect that the new drawn House district would be in their favor and that the House map would overall be beneficial for the Democratic Party. Considering that Democrats control the state legislature here and also control the governorship and have recently won the majority of House seats here and 2 Senate seats and also on the presidential level, they would widely expect, and arguably rightfully so, that the state of Colorado should look more beneficial for them than the GOP. But this map was drawn not by the partisan lawmakers, but instead drawn by this Congressional Commission. Now, in most states, there is a commission that will end up putting this forth towards the state legislature that will end up voting on it. But together, this map was drawn with a bipartisan committee of Democrats and Republicans, and it finalized on this map. You can see that the map is not too good for the Democratic Party relative to what the current one stands as. This is the old map. You can see here that all of the Democratic seats are pretty solid for the Democrats. There's an additional 3rd district that goes to Lauren Boebert by about 12 points in terms of the partisan lean. Then the other 2 districts are safe for the GOP. Well, in this new proposed map, with no type of political, background in terms of agenda, looking at the state, you don't see much changing in terms of those Democratic seats, but you do notice that the 7th district gets more competitive for the Democratic Party by, with the margin actually, the partisan lean being roughly half of what it was in the previous district. And then you take a look at this new drawn district, the 8th district, with an open race with a partisan lean of 3 for the GOP. Now, this is why Democrats are angry. They see Lauren Boebert in an even more solid Republican district. They see the 2 Republicans drawn into even more solid Republican districts less solid Republican districts at the expense of adding in this new district that leans towards the Republican Party. And then you take a look at the 2nd district, the 1st district, and the 6th district, and you see that Democrats are up here by pretty solid amounts. But that means that there is less of the Democratic Party vote share to go around the state. So, for instance, the old map had 3 safe Democratic areas and then 1 with a 12-point advantage for Jason Crow, the incumbent. In this new map, Jason is safe. He gets a D plus 16 seat. The neighboring district gets a D plus 55. And then the 7th district goes from being what was a very solid one for the Democrats, plus 15, down to just plus 6. Lauren Boebert, someone the Democratic Party has been targeting for quite some time now in terms of the election, is in a Trump plus 3 area, but a partisan lean of R plus 12. And when you take a look at the new map, it's R plus 15, which just makes it 3 points harder for the Democrats to oust Lauren Boebert in the future as a representative. And then this new district ends up being leaning for the GOP. This makes it so the number of Democratic-leaning seats and Republican-leaning seats stay the same, with 1 highly competitive seat in this proposed map. But the problem is for Democrats is that they view Colorado as a state that should be in their column, where they should undoubtedly have the majority in most cases. And obviously, gerrymandering is never good, but you have to see that this is why the Democratic Party seems to have a problem with this map, because it isn't just gerrymandering that the Democratic Party would want on their side in a state like Colorado, even though they may expect it. You have to take a look at it from their point of view. They have just won the state by nearly 15 points, the largest margin we've seen for a Democrat in Colorado in a very long time. So when Colorado is in this position where in 2022, it is very possible that they reclaim the majority of seats in the state of Colorado, it scares the Democratic Party that this is an actual reality. And when you take a look at the proposed maps, they weren't all this bad for the Democratic Party. I'm not entirely sure if they are going to show us all of these maps. There's a preliminary plan, for instance, we can take a look at. This is the preliminary plan. It gave the Democrats a lean in the 1st open district, and then the rest were nearly the same as they were, except the 8th district had narrowed down to a D plus 8 district. Lauren Boebert stayed around the same, but still an advancement for her numbers. In the 2nd staff plan, this map was drawn to a point where there would be 2 highly competitive districts. It would be the 8th district and the 7th district, one with an even partisan lean and one with a Democrat plus 4. Lauren Boebert would be solid up, and the 4th district would be solid up as well. But the thing is, it would take away, and I believe there's an additional Republican district right here in the 5th district. That would be a partisan lead of R plus 18. In this new map, this is the third plan. It actually is not different than this new map. So if we actually head over to the commission-approved plan, you will see that it is not changed relative to what it was. But the point being, looking at the first, second, or I guess the preliminary second and third map, you'll notice that the Democratic Party doesn't really come out on top in any of these maps in a sense that they feel rightfully assumed to. They look at this election result from 2020 and say, how do we end up in a position where we could nearly lose the number of House seats in the state of Colorado? How do we get into this position where the Republican Party could ultimately have the upper hand following 2022? So Democrats also will likely point to 2012. When they took a look at this map here, the Republican Party maintained 4 out of the 7 districts in the state of Colorado. The 1st district went to the Democrats, the 7th district also went to the Democrats, and the 2nd district went to the Democrats. But looking at the 4th district, looking at the 3rd district, these were areas in which the Democratic Party might have previously held. They lost in 2010 and never really won back. But if we take a look at the 2010 results here, you will see that amongst this map, Republicans actually gained the 2 outside seats in the state of Colorado. Previously speaking, Democrats had 5 to the Republican Party's 2. Well, after 2010, the Republican Party had 4 to the Democratic Party's 3. Looking at 2012, you fast forward and notice that the number of seats here don't change in terms of each political party, but they retain for the GOP. And that's actually the case as you continue moving on and on until 2018, when you actually saw a slightly different result. What happened in 2018 was that Democrats were able to win 1 additional congressional district, and you can see it right here. And as of right now, if we take a look at the House election results from 2020, you will see that the state of Colorado was not one of those states in which you saw a GOP gain. Even though many states did exhibit them, the state of Colorado just simply was not one of them. And I believe we can take a look at this district, which was the 2nd district, which went to the Democratic Party, meaning that they were able to maintain 4 out of the 7 districts in the state. But with this new addition, I think they were largely expecting there to be potentially a 5th. I think that they were expecting to be able to pick up a district with ease without the worry of the Republican Party eventually reclaiming back. And the reason being also not only the state of Colorado being a Democratic state, but also because many Democrats want to fight fire with fire. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you take a look at the national overview, one thing that you might notice in Democratic states versus Republican states is that they are trying to advance their own agendas, meaning that gerrymandering is going to be very prevalent. But the problem is for the Democratic Party is that not that they won't gerrymander, because you can see it happen across a number of states, but that they have limited ability in terms of what they do to gerrymander. You see, when you take a look at very populous states, such as the state of California, California actually has an independent commission that controls the redistricting process, which means that the Democratic Party will not have control over this redistricting process the way that they might in a state such as Maryland, which actually has 7 Democratic districts and 1 Republican district. Point is that Democrats tend to give up their power in certain states out of the name of trying to advance the country in the right direction with independent commissions. And not to say there are no Republican states on independent commissions. Idaho is actually one of them, which is a very solid Republican state. But in most cases, when you take a look at gerrymandering being brought up as a major issue, it is primarily by the Democratic Party. And when you take a look at those who actually bring gerrymandering as an issue to the Congress floor, take it to the floor of the Supreme Court, whatever it is, typically speaking, they are left-leaning. But like I said, you can see this happening in full force on the opposition side, with the GOP planning on gerrymandering, in a sense, their states. Texas is a perfect example. On the old map, you see a lot more light red. On this proposed new map, you see a lot more dark red. Essentially, you are going to be taking a look at the Republican Party ensuring that all of their incumbents end up winning. It removes 5 highly competitive seats. Sure, it adds 5 Democratic-leaning seats, but that just means that these are districts that are currently deemed competitive, in which Democrats currently hold. Taking a look at the old map here, you can see that feasibly, the Democratic Party could end up in the majority of House seats from the state of Texas. Well, on this brand new delegation, there would only be 1 truly and highly competitive seat and 1 Republican lean seat. The rest would be absolutely safe. That's why this is such a worry for the Democratic Party. And that's why you're seeing states such as Colorado receiving a lot of pushback by a number of key Democrats who know that they should be taking advantage of states such as Colorado with an additional electoral vote, with a new type of map, whatever it might be. I think that at the end of the day, the Democratic Party is trying to fight fire with fire, and typically speaking, are pretty upset when they take a look at a new congressional map and it doesn't show up in their favor. Not many states have actually finalized their map. Taking a look at it, you can see that it is currently Oregon and the state of New Hampshire and the state of Maine. Beyond that, we actually haven't seen much. To give a little bit of a sneak peek of what we might expect, the state of Indiana is expected to pass this Indiana House Republican Caucus map. You can see here that it takes an otherwise competitive district, the 5th district, and turns it into a very solid one for Victoria Sparks. Not really competitive whatsoever. The 7th district and the 1st district would end up being pretty solid. Point is, though, that the 1st and the 7th have always been pretty solid, but now it'll turn into even more solid in the 7th district, and the 5th district will end up being solid for the GOP, essentially preventing possible campaign challenges in 2022. So all in all here, the Democratic Party is the party that is going to be falling behind the GOP when it comes down to redistricting. And that's why, that is ultimately what is fueling this anger towards this Colorado redistricting process. Because Democrats want to be able to combat issues of want to come back to the issues of gerrymandering, but the only real way to do that is by gerrymandering your own states. I can definitely expect gerrymandering to occur on both sides, and it always has occurred on both sides, but obviously one political party does have more power in terms of this redistricting process than the other, and that is not the Democratic Party. But in fact, the Republican Party maintains a 100-seat advantage over the Democrats here. But when they took a look at Colorado specifically, I mean, I understand the idea that the map should look different than it has in the past. When you take a look at the state of Colorado's trend from the beginning of the 21st century, you'll see that Colorado shifted 22 points over the past 20 years. 22 points in the leftward direction, nearly a point a year if you average that all out. Actually, more than a point a year if you average it all out. Colorado is a state in which the Democratic Party has pretty solid margins. And just beyond the 2020 election, looking at the new polling data for some upcoming races, you can see here that Michael Bennet is expected to win between 8 and 13%. That's pretty solid for a Democrat, especially given the circumstances of today, with Joe Biden falling out of favor. In addition, Jared Polis, the governor of the state of Colorado, maintains a 20-point advantage over his potential GOP challenger. The reason for that is because Democrats seem to be popular in the state of Colorado, which is, again, going back to that point about whether or not this new map should have been drawn in this way to a point where the GOP could in fact benefit more from compared to where they are today. Because there is no real reason as to why it is possible or why it is more likely that Democrats are able to win in Colorado by 14.5%, but are expected to have a much more difficult time at winning districts in the state of Colorado. There are plenty of valid concerns for the Democrats with this new map about whether or not this commission should continue moving forward with the maps. Obviously, Democrats taking main control would allow them to gerrymander the state of Colorado in a way that tempering it is beneficial. But all in all, I mean, you are looking at the Democratic Party crying out, saying that this is simply something that they cannot afford to do on a continuous basis. That Colorado needs to be an anomaly, that this type of change in electoral map that doesn't benefit them in a heavy manner needs to be ultimately uprooted and fundamentally changed. Because Democrats are going to want to gerrymander no matter what happens across the state, and it is going to be, to them, very important that they are able to do so if the Republican Party is also contributing actively in such an event. And based off some of these proposed maps, I wouldn't doubt it one bit. So all in all here, there wasn't much good for the Colorado Democratic Party or just the Democratic Party in general, but there certainly was a bit to unpack. None of these areas are very solid, I would say, for the Democratic Party. None of these, I would say, are jumping out to me as very good possibilities for the Democratic Party or something that they wish would have passed. It just simply is something that I'm putting out there to show you that none of these maps really benefited the Democratic Party the way I think that they had wanted it to. I think they truly wanted to make it so they would be very solid in the state of Colorado after such a large victory. To be completely honest with you, looking at the 2020 election, one of the largest we've seen in quite some time now, and yet they simply don't get that. So the concern is that many Republican states will end up gerrymandering beyond oblivion with the Democratic Party trying to play it safe and trying to play it fair. Obviously, the more noble cause, but in American politics, rarely anything is ever noble. And at the end of the day, I do think that both parties are going to end up fighting fire with fire, and that starts in states such as Colorado, but more so in states in which Democrats and Republicans have complete control over the redistricting process. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.